Hello students, good morning. I am C.A. Srimajan and I will be taking paper 2 for you, the chapter on the Indian Contract Act 1872 along with the brief background, followed shortly by three other internal units of it on consideration, essential elements and performance of contract. From real life as well as the examination perspective, Contract Act is very important for us as students as well as in the times to come as a professional. When we get to see exactly what a document is, we need to analyze whether it suffices all the prerequisites and requirements that it should have. If in case that is yes, the answer comes out to be in assertion or in affirmative, then in that case, the contract document or the agreement, either ways, is valid and you can continue forward. However, there are certain grounds on which you can avail remedy or where maybe a breach of performance is not exactly a breach. And for that to be understood, Contract Act and the understanding of that act primarily is important. Further, there have been certain acts which have been brought into effect somewhere from the Contract Act 1872. For example, the Sale of Goods Act, which was initially a part of the Contract Act, has been repealed to that effect from the Indian Contract Act, and a separate Sales of Goods Act 1932 came into picture, and similar was the case with the Partnership Act as well. So today, in our journey of going through the Indian Contract Act 1872, we'll be taking up all these aspects one by one from your examination perspective, giving you insight for the real life as well. The objective of the Contract Act is essentially that we need to analyze and we need to understand what are the rights and obligations that a promisor or a promisee need to undergo and need to be taken care of while they are under an agreement or while they are under a contract that they have signed, because honoring a contract is definitely of utter importance, because otherwise it may lead to breach of contract, and therefore at the other end you may have aggrieved parties who may create or maybe take legal recourse or defense for any kind of an issue. So at that point of time, the main pointers that required are rights, the obligations, understanding who is an aggrieved party, what are the legal remedies, and what exactly is your contract. In fact, what exactly is your valid contract. The Indian contract makes it obligatory that it is done and it compels the defaulters to honor their particular commitments. Now, very first day of September 1872, this particular act comes into picture. The applicability extends to the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir, unlike certain other acts, where specifically Jammu and Kashmir has been made applicable because it has the status of a special state. Now, when I talk about the word contract, it is a legally enforceable agreement between two or more parties with mutual obligations. So what I understand is, the first point that comes to my picture when I see about any contract or a question relating to any particular contract, the first thing that comes is that two or more parties should exist. Then the agreement that has been into picture should be legally enforceable. That is, a legal relationship should emanate out of a particular agreement. Then there should be presence of an agreement. And when I talk about the word agreement itself, it says there should be an offer or a proposal. Then there should be an acceptance to it, and subsequent to the acceptance, there should be consideration as well. So all this together makes the word contract, barring there are few other requirements which we shall be dealing in few moments from now. Then we talk about the word agreement, agreement under the Contract Act. So what is agreement? It says every promise and set of promises forming consideration for each other is an agreement. So the first word that needs our importance here is the word promise. The second word, set of promises, can also emanate. That is, it can be one activity altogether or maybe a series of activities which can be a part of an agreement. Then there has to be presence of a consideration. Now this consideration may be adequate, this consideration may be inadequate, or there may be a gratuitous act as well. Then it should involve an offer, a proposal by one person, and acceptance of such offer or proposal by another person. That is, one person cannot make an offer to himself and accept the same as well. So, in the end, that we can understand is, a contract is a legally enforceable agreement adding more to that, when we understand the definition of an agreement, the thing that comes to our mind is that all contracts have to be agreements because a contract is an enforceable agreement. However, all agreements are not contracts. Putting it in chart format, a contract, an agreement, the legal enforceability, and the agreement being offer, acceptance, along with consideration. Now, the essentials of a valid contract. The first is the intention to create a legal obligation. Now, this obligation is a legal relationship. That is, there should nothing which should be saying that it is a social relationship. It is something out of love and affection where I cannot go back and take or claim my remedy from the court of law. Second, there should be consent, and more than that, there should be free consent. The word free is of prime importance when we are talking of consent. Consent firstly means that two people think in the same way. So what I am trying to tell you, you should be understanding it in the same sense. Then it will be consent, or as we use it in the legal terms, it is consensus ad idem, the Latin word for it. There are certain other few exceptions. Now, when I'm talking of the word free consent, we understood what exactly is consent, the consensus ad idem that we use generally for this purpose. But what is the importance of the word free? See, certain times it can so happen that you are being forced to take a particular decision, you are being forced to take a particular, to give your consent on a particular matter or a subject, or maybe under the influence of someone, your decision is manipulated by the dominance of the will of some other person, or maybe by virtue of some mistake or misrepresentation having at an either end, the consent that has been accorded to a particular subject matter or question is not free and is biased. So that free consent does not render your particular contract as valid, and it may be void and voidable in certain situations which we'll discuss later. And that there's something which is important again is capacity of parties. For example, if I talk about a young child who is a minor cannot sustain his own self, and therefore if a minor enters into a contract, he may not be able to take care of the obligations that he is under in that particular contract. So we need to identify, along with minor and certain other credentials or certain other pointers that we need to take care of, or the various criteria to identify who is a competent party. Is he capacitated to be a competent party to a contract or undertake a contract and fulfill its obligations? We need to understand that as well when we are talking about a particular contract or we're checking a particular contract. And there are certain agreements which are expressly declared as void under the Indian Contract Act 1872. One being with a minor. Two, maybe you're forcing someone and restraining marriage of a person. Third, maybe that you are restraining a person in case of undertaking a particular course of trade for himself, and a few others as well which should be taken up. So those kinds of agreements in specific which have been outlined in the Indian Contract Act as void shall not constitute a valid contract. So we, while understanding, while checking, while giving our objective unbiased view on whether a contract is valid or not, we will have to check whether it falls into this particular category of contracts or not. Then the consideration for any particular contract has to be lawful. So it should not just be consideration that we talked about when we were dealing with the term contract and agreement, but this has to be a lawful consideration. Now, what do I mean by a lawful consideration? For a brief example, I write notes for I write a particular book, and my publisher tells me that in consideration for the book that you have written to me, I won't pay you royalty in cash. However, I may kidnap this person X, and therefore since he would be kidnapped, he would not be able to write on a particular book for you or a particular topic against you or on the same subject matter that as you are writing, and therefore that would be appropriate consideration. Now, kidnapping and abduction is definitely something which is under the Indian Penal Code as a crime, and appropriate penalty has been levied for that under the Indian Penal Code, and therefore, since it's unlawful, therefore such a kind of consideration would not be an essential for a valid contract and would render the particular contract void. Now, at certain points of time, there may be questions that come in your exam saying you need to identify the types of contracts as per their validity, as per their formation, as per their performance. But the only thing is, first we need to know as to what kind of contracts do exist, or how can we particularly identify as to what kind of a contract or what is the current status of a particular contract. If I say is a contract valid if it has all the essentials? Say, when is it void, voidable, illegal, unenforceable, express, implied, quasi, tacit, executed, unilateral or bilateral. One is, I know all these names when I go for my exam. Two is, I also know what they are, so that when I go for an exam and when I have a particular case study in front of me, I know what does it mean and how do I particularly identify is a remedy required, is there a breach, is the performance being there, and what kind of a contract is it. So to understand that, let's go a little further. A valid contract. An agreement which has all the essential elements of a contract is called a valid contract. Now, what are these 5 essentials? We've just done that. Consideration. A lawful consideration, in fact. We've talked about free consent. We've talked about intention to create a legal obligation. We've talked about capacity of parties or competent parties, and agreements not expressly declared as void. So if all these 5 elements are there, the essential elements are there, my contract is valid. The second one, when is my contract void? Any contract which ceases to be enforceable by law, that is, which is not enforceable by law after a particular activity. A contract when originally entered may be valid. So when I'm entering into that contract, it may be valid, it may be fine, all essential elements may be present, it may be binding on the parties because it was essentially valid. But subsequently, some action takes place and my particular contract is rendered void. For example, any crime which has been converted into a source of profit, or if an act to be done under any contract is opposed to public policy. Now I talk about the word opposed to public policy. What can that be? One small example that I'm talking about here. Public offices exist. Say, for example, the post of an MP, the post of an MLA, the post of an MCD councillor, then maybe in the ministries at certain levels, or maybe the president and the prime minister itself is a public office. If any such public office is being contracted about or sold, or there has been a dealing with respect to holding a public office that is opposed to public policy, and any such contract is void. Now when I talk with that, initially it was enforceable, initially it was valid, initially it was binding, and later it becomes void. There can be another example to it, and that example can be that a company takes a particular contract. For that particular contract, it has filed all its tenders. After filing all its tenders, bidding, putting all its financial as well as technical bid, or what all requirements were required have been furnished, the contract goes in favor of the company. A few days later, when the contract and the working on the contract has started in practical sense, then what happens is certain regulations now require approval from a public office. Bribing that public office and converting that crime to get any source of a profit at that point of time is something which is opposed to public policy. Or maybe you get your relative on that public office through sale of that public office, and then you get that particular confirmation or that particular approval from that department. So that contract in itself is void because it is opposed to the word public policy, the public interest, and this is void. Next, differentiating it from the word voidable. Now when it is void, it is not binding, void, it is not valid, void, you cannot be taking any benefit out of it. On the other hand, voidable either of the parties to the contract here would have an option that they can continue with the contract and its performance. That is, an agreement which is enforceable by law at the option of one or more of the parties thereto, but not at the option of other or others. That is, only to the party to the contract shall have an option of taking forward a performance. This shall be a voidable contract. Now, when do we identify that this voidable word comes into picture? When any of the element of free consent is missing. Element of free consent. So when was my consent there? When was my free consent there? Needs to be checked by me. Consensus side item should exist. Whatever I am trying to say in the same sense should be understood by the other. That is consent. Free consent, there should be no fraud. There should be no coercion. There shouldn't be no dominance or under influence. There should not be any mistake. There should not be any misrepresentation when I'm talking about a particular subject matter or decision related to a subject matter or a contract related to a particular subject matter. If it is given with absolute free consent, then the point of voidability or being void does not exist. But in case if either of the element of free consent is missing, say for example someone has threatened me and told me to file a particular sign a particular contract or give a particular payment, the element of free consent with respect to coercion exists, and therefore it is not being given with free consent. It is not being given with the free will of the person. It has been by the threatening of a third party or maybe a party to the contract, and therefore the option of voidability exists, that the person who is the aggrieved party here, who has been threatened directly or indirectly, may accept the contract or may reject the contract on the same date or at a future date. This contract continues to be good, enforceable, unless it is repudiated. That is, till the time my aggrieved party does not come into picture and essentially mention that free consent does not exist with respect to a particular subject matter or a particular contract, till that time my contract is a valid contract. If such non-free consent or absence of free consent is highlighted, is mentioned, is stated, then at that point of time my contract gets the nature of a voidable contract, and my aggrieved party shall have the right that either my aggrieved party accepts the particular contract or it rejects the particular contract. Now, there can be another type of a contract, illegal. We hear a lot of illegal kind of an activities taking place. One may be smuggling. One may be getting the prohibited goods, which again is similar to smuggling itself. Then recent was demonetization, when conversions were happening of all the black money or maybe the old currency notes into new, or taking off the old currency notes and getting it deposited in different manners into the banking channel so as to make it valid. So this can be an illegal thing, and anybody taking a contract for such kind of an activity, it shall be an illegal contract. Why? Because it is forbidden by law. Because there were certain limits and criteria which were brought forward by our central government and the RBI, that only up to a specific amount you can be depositing, then it should be belonging to you, then you need to be providing all your documentation. So given that recent example, this was forbidden by law, or maybe a specified criteria under law was put forward. So anything which went against it was illegal. Or further, if I talk about this particular definition, it is of such nature that if permitted would defeat the provisions of any law. It is fraudulent, that is an intention of fraud, intention to deceive another person exists, or an injury to a person or property of another may be caused. The court regards it as immoral, opposed to public policy, and the contract is definitely illegal. These agreements are definitely punishable by law. So under the Contract Act, you can definitely take the person to court. Alternatively, the IPC, the Indian Penal Code, also lays down punishments for certain of these crimes that you may mention. These agreements are void ab initio, that is from the very first date that these contracts, these illegal contracts have been entered into, these shall be void, that is, they are not valid. You cannot be undertaking or taking any benefit out of such contracts. Even the performance shall not be paid. Therefore, all illegal agreements are void agreements, but all void agreements are not illegal. So my illegal agreement from the very first day, it was void, it was not valid, but my void agreement was not illegal from the very first day. It may be that initially it was valid, initially it was enforceable by law, subsequently some action took place, subsequently some activity took place, and therefore my contract turned void. So in short, if I mention, the very first thing is my contract can be void, and then will it be illegal or will it not be illegal? So void becomes illegal, less chances, but all illegal agreements are definitely void, in fact void ab initio. Next, what is an unenforceable contract? A contract which is good in substance, but there has been some technical defect from the side of law which makes it unenforceable. They are neither void nor voidable, but you cannot have any legal remedy out of it, or maybe if some non-performance happens, some breach happens, you cannot really take a legal recourse for that particular kind of contract and demand performance or remedy. Now this was on the basis of your validity. Second type of agreements that we were discussing was on the basis of formation. The first here being express, implied, then quasi, and then tacit. Coming to these. Express contract. When we are talking about a particular thing, we are putting down all statements required for it in a written or a spoken format and expressly discussing and putting down each and every terms and condition with respect to that particular contract, then it is said to be express. That is, my T&C are well identified as well as discussed into picture. So there is no ambiguity. Implied contract, when we haven't really expressed anything, when we haven't really spoken about something or written a particular document to enable a contract, but from the act or conduct of a particular party or from the circumstance of the case, a contract can be made out. Small example, regularly we all may be taking a bus, maybe taking a metro. So it's an implied contract. When I board a bus, I purchase a ticket, then the driver is bound to drop me at my particular destination which is on his route. However, if I get into a wrong bus, it is not an implied contract. If I get into a right bus, I have purchased a ticket, it is an implied contract and it needs to be performed. Now, where does this implied come here? From the time that I purchase my ticket and get inside the bus. Similarly for metro as well. However, I get inside a train, I don't come with a ticket. I don't even take another ticket. And I just take a seat. That's not implied contract. Just because I'm sitting there does not mean that I need to reach my destination because I haven't paid for it. So since activity from one side is still pending, activity from one side hasn't taken place, it is not a contract at all. The implied aspect also does not exist because it's not a contract. So since we talk about both the words together, since the contract itself is not there, the word implied will have no effect. Then it's a quasi-contract created by law. That is, I don't specifically have a contract, but because of some law which is enforceable on me or under which I'm governed as an entity or as a person, a contract comes into picture. These are strictly not contracts as there is no intention of parties to enter into contract. Legal obligation imposed on a party is required to perform it. For example, we talk about contract of agency. We talk about contract of partnership. Now what happens in these cases is, I don't really sign a contract with my agent every time he does an activity for me, but I've signed a contract of agency with him already. So under that agency, he's required under law to take care of all activities that I have entrusted him for. He is required to take payments on my behalf, make payments on my behalf, give me all accounts. I need not sign a separate agreement with him for that particular purpose. Why? Because the contract of agency or the act which relates to agency, that is the Indian Contract Act again, but specifically agency, shall take care of it. Again, Sale of Goods Act would also have a picture play here. Secondly, partnership. When I enter into a partnership, I don't enter with a separate agreement with all my partners separately to say that you are the main partner, you are the designated partner, you are the working partner, and now you'll be taking care of X, you'll be taking care of my working affairs, you'll be taking care of signing checks, you'll be taking care of making payments, receiving payments, signing all documents required in the statute, getting my balance sheet ready, signing my balance sheet, etc., etc., etc. Why? Because my Partnership Act 1932 already governs that what are the rights, duties, liabilities of my working partner, what is the status of my dormant partner, what is the status of my nominal or my sleeping partner. So I need not sign specific agreements to get them into action as required. However, in quasi-contract, that is one point that very much requires our attention, is that a person shall not be allowed to enrich himself at the expense of another. That is unjust enrichment. We might hear this word on and off. So what is unjust enrichment? Is very much important here when we're talking about a quasi-contract. One must not be allowed to enrich himself at the expense of another. So something that comes as a benefit to me should not be a disadvantage to the another. That is what a quasi-contract would also put into picture. Last is a tacit contract that arises from the conduct of the parties. So if two parties, while they are talking or while they are dealing, again, when I talk about the act of conduct, similar to implied, but here only from the conduct, not from an act. So my behavior on a certain particular note may help me identify that it is a tacit contract. Coming to the last, basis the performance, what types of contracts do I have? First, the executed contract. An executed contract in which both the parties or maybe all the parties to the contract have performed their respective obligation. So whatever was supposed to be done has already been done by all the parties to the contract. That's executed. Why? Because my action, my subject matter has already been closed, has already been completed. The executory contract, where either one or both the parties to the contract have still to perform their obligations in future. That is, only one has completed, the other is yet to complete their particular obligation in respect to that particular contract. So partially performed or wholly unperformed is an executory contract. Let's just take a small example. Say I have a particular building to be constructed. Second, after that construction, the interior decoration and furnishing is also in the hands of my builder and I have paid for it. Now, when will this be an executed contract? When the building has been constructed, when the interior decoration has been done, when the furnishing has been done, then it will be an executed contract. On the other hand, my builder says, whatever I had to do on my own, that is the building construction, I have completed that. However, I had hired people for interior decoration and I have hired the particular competent person. And for furnishing also, I have hired the competent person, so it is executed from my end. That is not executed, that is executory. Because the responsibility and onus for all the three activities lied with my builder while I was signing my contract or works contract or maybe contract for building a particular location, and it mentioned all three. Therefore, the onus was on my builder. Once three are completed, it is executed. Otherwise, either one activity is also missing from this chain, it will be an executory contract. Now coming to the next aspect of it. The next aspect is, what is a unilateral contract? In which only one party has to perform his obligation at the time of formation. The other party having fulfilled his obligation at the time of contract or before the contract comes into existence. So maybe there can be two things. One, there is a book to be published. Once that book is to be published, the written matter needs to be ready. The book has been published, the book has been put into market. As an author, the author has completed his or her task. So generally what happens is, once the books are done, the contract is signed on the present date. After it is put for proofing and then publishing. Now when does the obligation on my publisher to pay the royalty comes? As identified in my contract. So my contract has already been signed along with the publishing of the book, but the obligation at the time of formation was with respect to payment of royalty, and this payment of royalty shall be as stipulated in my contract. And what does the stipulation talk about? That maybe after 6 months, example, after 6 months, whatever sale will be, accordingly payments shall be made. Or maybe after a year, we understand what is your sales, and basis that the amount of royalty that has been agreed upon in my agreement shall be paid and to the credit of my author who has written the particular book. Next, a bilateral contract. One in which the obligation on both the parties to the contract is outstanding at the time of formation. It is something with an executory consideration. So in the initial one, what happened was, my author had already written something, my author's book was already published, contract was signed. After the contract, only the royalty comes. So one action was pending, it was a unilateral contract. Second, there is a contract for a building which has been entered into. My builder keeps building, raises me invoices simultaneously, I keep paying. So one block of my building comes up, say payment for this, say 50 lakhs is made to the contractor. Another floor comes up, another 50 lakhs is paid with the taxation liabilities that arise accordingly, and they are paid across. Third floor is built up, or the slabs are put, and the tranche or the payment for it is also made. So this is also outstanding. This is also outstanding at both ends. We haven't really paid him the entire amount upfront at one particular time or time period or moment, and he hasn't also made it for us in one single day. So slab by slab he's putting, and slab by slab we are paying. So executory at the point of time for both the parties involved in the particular contract. Now what is an offer? This is another term which is definitely of relevance to us, because when we were talking about the word agreement, the definition was offer plus acceptance plus consideration. So till the time I do not know that what is an offer, what constitutes an offer, then what type of an offer is actually valid, I cannot understand whether that offer should be accepted or not accepted. And if not accepted or whether to be accepted or not to be accepted, should a consideration also flow for that? Because if it's not an offer, no consideration is required. If it's an offer, definitely acceptance and consideration is required to constitute a valid contract. And therefore for that we need to understand what the term exactly means. Now my Indian Contract Act specifically defines this word. An alternative word for this is also proposal. So section 2 is talking about proposal. It says when one person signifies to another, so there have to be two people, again, that one person who makes an offer, the other one who has to accept. The offer can be to do something or to refrain or abstain from doing something with a view to obtaining the assent of other. Such act or abstinence is said as proposal. Now let me give you a brief example on this. Everybody here being students of CA intermediate course, definitely would be studying something which is known as Section 28 of the Income Tax Act 1961, which talks about profits and gains from business or profession. Or maybe when I even talk about charging section directly, actually, Section 28 itself. Section 28 says that if you are paying an amount to somebody for not doing a particular business transaction, or maybe not carrying out a particular business line or activity, that would be a profit and gains from business or profession. So there we have that we restrict someone and pay that person some consolidated amount to abstain from doing something or carrying out a business activity. That particular Section 28 item of Income Tax Act is abstainment. That is also an offer that is being made to a person. Say for example, let's take another light thing. There is a coaching institute running. The person is one of the well-known faculties in any subject, maybe not even for maybe an MBA class that person runs for these entrances. And at that point of time, some newbie enters into the market and says that I will pay you a consolidated amount, maybe say 5 crore, or maybe I pay you a recurring amount of say 50 lakhs every year, but you will stop teaching this particular subject now onwards and you will get this particular income every year. So one person is asking the other to abstain from doing something and paying him for that. So the offer comes that you will not teach say quantitative aptitude or maybe verbal ability for MBA entrances. This is an offer because someone is being asked for his willingness to abstain from doing something. His acceptance is desired and a consideration along with is also being proposed. That's an offer. So this offer needs to be definite, identified to what you do not have to do or what you have to do. And there is an intention towards a contract that come on, a legal relationship has to occur by signing this. And in case if you do not agree to the terms and conditions, then maybe whatever sum of say 5 crores or 50 lakhs per year or random amount, whatever it may be, you will have to refund or maybe along with interest. If the person after taking all this amount comes back into the picture teaching such course. Invitation to offer, there's another term in the which is used regularly in this particular context. Now this invitation to offer is an act which is precedent to making an offer. So while an offer can be specific, that is A may give an offer to B. On the other hand, an invitation to offer is more of a general sense. That is, you may put a public notice in a newspaper saying, we are willing to sell this particular property situated at Connaught Place. This is an invitation to offer. Anyone willing to purchase may inform at the given contact number. So that is an invitation to offer because it is generally for the entire public and not to a specified person as such. There is an inducement that someone may come to you. There is a willingness to negotiate because the price not yet decided, but since it is to be a buy and sell transaction, therefore the price can be negotiated between the parties who come to the particular proposer. Then it may give rise to an offer after due negotiation. Then my offer would be with an intention to get someone's assent, willingness, acceptance, but my invitation to offer may not result in acceptance. No expression of willingness, nothing to be bound by the invitation to offer, and there may be a conversion from invitation to offer to an offer or a proposal. But every offer and proposal may not be an invitation to offer. Every offer and proposal, in fact, is invitation to offer. But every invitation to offer may not become an offer or proposal. The test to decide this would only be with the intention term. So in case if there is an intention to be bound by a particular activity or to be bound with a particular mindset or to be bound with a particular offer that has been made to you, then with that intention, that offer or proposal may come into picture and the invitation to offer is with the binding nature. So the real test thus lies in the intention. And there has been one remarkable judicial pronouncement which has been in the English law, Balfour versus Balfour. Now here what happened was that the husband promised to pay to the wife some money on a regular basis. Now what happens is the husband who's working at his office comes back with his salary every month, tells his wife that I'll give you a particular sum, so if you take care of the household also, you can go out for shopping also, and you can get all the requirements of my house done within that particular amount. Now if the husband does not pay this amount, now this is a social obligation, this is something out of love and affection, this is out of the relationship that is a subsisting between the two parties, that is the husband and wife, that is, therefore no legal relationship would exist, and since no legal relationship would exist, therefore this was no offer, acceptance, and therefore no contract also. So we need to understand if there is a social nature involved in a particular transaction or involved in a particular contract, there is no legal relationship that entails with it, and no remedy that can be taken forward for that particular activity. Then there was another similar ruling as well, the Harvey and the Fissy by the Privy Council. Now what happened in the Harvey and Fissy? This person makes an invitation to offer, and the plaintiff in his notice puts to another person, the defendant in the instant case, Fissy, that will you send us some bumper hall pens? So the first question that he sends is, will you send us some bumper hall pen? And the second questions that he puts is, what is the price, in fact the lowest price of such pen? Now what Mr. Plaintiff does is, what he gets first is, from the reply, the price of the pen. He reserves his answer with respect to will he send or will he not send the bumper hall pen. So he's already given only his price. He has later on issued his reserved viewpoint on will he send his bumper hall pen as yes. Therefore, in the instant case, the defendant was told that it was not an offer because it was only issued with an intention of knowing and not with an intention of sale. The reservation on the particular answer or the reservation on the particular issue that will the pen be sold or not sold was given later. Only the price initially came, and therefore it is not valid. There was another case, and this was Macpherson versus Appanna. Now what happened was the owner of a property said that he would not accept any price which is less than rupees 6,000 for it. He was to sell a property. He says anything less than 6,000 was not acceptable. This statement thus indicated that he is asking people to come up with prices more than 6,000 for his property. He did not make it to a specific person. It was general in nature. There was an expression to willingness to negotiate at any amount which is greater than 6,000, negotiation aspect, and therefore it was an invitation to offer and not an offer per se. So these kind of particular examples of judicial rulings of the past definitely help us understand that when do we constitute a particular transaction as an offer, or when do we constitute it as an invitation to offer. So what are the rules as to a valid offer? Now I have seen what's an offer, I know what is an invitation to offer, I can distinguish between it based on certain characteristics, or maybe with the identification of the word negotiation and intention. But what exactly is a valid offer is also important. Creating legal relationships is important. It must be expressed or implied, that is written, oral, or maybe by the conduct or act of the parties or the behavior of the parties. And there must be some certainty, that is, no ambiguity should exist with respect to a particular contract. All terms should be specifically made clear. However, certain terms and conditions may be put forward which can be agreed upon and discussed by parties before putting it in the contract. Then two identical cross offers do not make a contract. So I make a contract, I give you an offer, you give me another cross offer on the same subject matter, or maybe a counter offer. That does not make a contract. That is a cross offer or counter offer. Then an invitation to offer needs to be identified. That is not a valid offer. It must be either specific or general. General, but again, certain terms and conditions may be general, may be left open, may be yet to be decided, but otherwise to a specific party. This offer needs to be communicated, and it must be made with a view to obtain the consent. View to obtain the consent of the offeree. If all these particular 9 points exist, this is a valid offer. That now comes the warning bell. That how do we need to identify what kind or what type of an offer is it? First, what is a general offer? An offer made to public at large. Because I'm saying it in a general sense, I may be talking to everybody around about it. Second, it's a cross offer. That is, it is made to a particular specified person and I get a counter offer back. Or maybe directly to a particular person as such. Special offer. Either sides give a proposal without being aware of the other's proposal. For example, I wish to go to Mr. A to buy his horse. And Mr. A comes back to me and says, I want to buy a horse. So till the time my offer reached him, he already came to me with his offer. So he did not know that I wanted to sell my horse to him, and I did not know that he was willing to sell his horse to me. And therefore, it's a special offer. Counter offer. Imposing conditions resulting in varying or modifying the offer. So someone comes to me with an offer saying, buy my horse. Okay. I'll buy your horse, but along with that, you will have to get me a stable along with it so that I keep this horse. 2, you will have to get me a contract with a person who can get me fodder for the fodder is the food for the horse. So fodder for the horse. So giving and imposing those particular conditions attached to purchasing the horse from that particular seller, I have given a counter offer which will vary or modify the offer. So he'll say, if you are taking so much extra, then in that case my price would also get altered with respect to purchasing of the horse, attached with the stable, attached with the contract for the fodder of the horse. Therefore that will be a counter offer. My offer gets modified. Standing or open or continuing offer. It is made to public at large, open for a specified time. Say in the newspaper there comes an ad saying, we are bringing out a tender for chartered accountants to apply for the internal audit of a particular entity. And this is to public at large who are chartered accountants, specific community, but public at large. Specified time, there is some time deadline by the time when you need to submit and furnish your financial as well as technical bid. And it is a continuing offer till a specified date. It is open for all chartered accountants within a particular criteria. Say if it lays down that you should have 5 years of continuous practice or maybe 10 years of continuous practice, within that bracket range, whatever chartered accountant qualifies or firm qualifies can apply. So that extent, it's a standing offer, it's an open offer, it's a continuing offer. Next, if I've had an offer, the next step would be definitely acceptance is required so that we can move further to making it a contract along with consideration. So my section 2B of the Act specifically talks about a proposal when the person to whom the proposal is made gives his assent, his confirmation, his affirmation, he agrees to do a particular contract or enter into a particular contract, the proposal is said to be accepted. He converts the offer into a promise. That means offer plus acceptance makes it a promise. Thus, an offer by itself cannot create a legal relationship. When it is a promise, it constitutes a legal relationship because someone proposed me some activity, someone proposed me some work, and I accepted. Therefore, I promised to do something that was offered to me. Now, the legal rules regarding valid acceptance. It must be given only by the person to whom the offer is made. Say, for example, if an offer has come to me, the reply or the acceptance to it should only come from me. I cannot make some third party who is not a party to that contract or the contract that is proposed to be entered into to reply on my behalf. It must be absolute, unqualified. It should not be conditional. Because if it's conditional, again what comes is, I was given an offer, I imposed certain conditions, which came down in the nature of varying or modifying my contract, and therefore it came down to becoming a counter offer. My counter offer should not exist. My absolute and unqualified acceptance should be there. It must be communicated by the acceptor. That is, if an offer needs to be communicated to me, I need to inform the other person also that I have accepted a particular contract or an offer that was given to me. It should not be conditional. Again, it's a counter proposal otherwise. It will be within a reasonable time or time stipulated. For example, if I have been told that once I have made this offer to you, you need to reply back in the next 7 days, I need to reply within the time specified or stipulated or identified or already communicated to me. If I do not reply within that particular time period, that means that I have not accepted the particular contract. There can be another way out. Sometimes it can be that a question may come to you saying, Mr. A put forward an offer for Mr. B to purchase his horse. That is, A wants to purchase B's horse. Let me just put it down here. A wanted to purchase B's horse. And A also says, if B does not reply in 7 days, he would deem it as acceptance. That is, in a way, he says your silence would mean acceptance. Your silence would mean acceptance. So he says, in 7 days, reply back to me. If in 7 days you do not reply, I will understand that you have accepted. If the offer has been communicated like this and B does not communicate within 7 days, then A's willingness to purchase B's horse would be deemed to be accepted. Silence as mode of acceptance. But for that, there must be a specific point as well, discussed within the two well beforehand, while discussing the particular horse as well. On the other hand, there can be another particular example with respect to the same horse maybe. So A comes to B saying that I want to particularly purchase your horse. B says, okay, you can purchase my horse. A says, I feel and I deem and I understand that your horse is totally sound. He's particularly in the best of his health. If you do not inform me of any adverse condition. So in case if B does not inform A that his horse is mad, if his horse is not healthy, then A will understand that the horse is healthy. So silence with respect to the ill health of horse would mean to A that the horse is healthy. There again, silence as construing something essential in a particular contract. So your acceptance must be in the prescribed mode. If it is required in written. If it is required in oral. If it has been discussed with respect to silence as a mode of acceptance, then it will be silence as a mode of acceptance. But mere silence is not acceptance. Silence only when as directed, discussed, clear, understood. Then my silence is acceptance. Otherwise, mere silence is not acceptance. Now, acceptance must succeed the offer. It's not that I go and say to Mr. Z that, okay, I'm ready to buy a horse. But Mr. X was never ready to sell his horse. So I cannot say that without you willing to sell your horse, I want to buy a horse. So first that should be offer, and only then acceptance must follow as a second step. You cannot give your acceptance and then say that give me an offer. Then acceptance can also be by your conduct, that is by your act, that is can be by your behavior. So A can be like that. In case if you come to my office on Monday, that means that you have accepted my offer of working in my office. Great. So that conduct of entering his office on Monday at the given time itself means that the person is willing to work in that particular office, and that conduct would mean acceptance. Now, when are the following complete? We've talked about what is an offer. We've talked about what are the essentials of a valid offer. Now we've talked about basically what is an offer, what is a valid offer, how it is differentiated from an invitation to offer, rules regarding an offer. We've talked about what is acceptance, rules regarding acceptance. But what is important is that I told communication of both offer and acceptance is also important. That is, my offer should be communicated to the person from whom I'm expecting acceptance, and his acceptance should also be communicated back to me. So, how silent or how verbal or how explicit is it there in the Contract Act 1872? Let's just see that. The communication is complete when it comes to the knowledge of the person to whom it is made. So when I have my offer and I have communicated it to the person from whom I am expecting an acceptance, my offer is complete. On the other hand, when is my acceptance complete? As against the proposer, when it is put in a course of transmission to him so as to be out of the power of the acceptor, that I have sent my acceptance to you, it has been dispatched from my end, it has been transmitted from my end, now it is not in my hands to withdraw it or to take it back, then it is complete with respect to the proposer. As against the acceptor, when is it complete? When it comes to the knowledge of the proposer. So one, as regards the proposer, when is my work complete or when is my communication complete of acceptance? I have put it in the course of transmission and it is about to be received or maybe received by the proposer. And as against the acceptor, when he comes to know that the proposer already has now come to know about my acceptance with respect to the said proposal or offer. Now it can be by the conduct of an act or by any omission to do any act or something. So maybe I haven't done something and that means acceptance, or maybe say silence, or it can be by the conduct that you said to me, you told me to do something, and since I've done this particular activity, say you asked me to come to your office by 10 a.m. On Monday, if I wanted to join the job, and if I have come, by conduct itself would say that I have given my acceptance. A mental unilateral assent in one's own mind would not amount to communication. Now what does this mean? What is a mental unilateral assent? Let's identify what's the word unilateral. One-sided. Uni is one. Unilateral assent would be that only either side knows that what is the particular mindset. What is my mind's view on a particular point or a topic. So if I know I have accepted an offer does not mean that I have accepted and communicated. Therefore, if I have accepted, I need to communicate. I do not need to put it in my mind. Say, in the examination situation, you may get a question saying, Mr. X advertised for selling of his car. He gave all the details regarding the model. Mr. Y comes to him and says, I am contemplating buying this car. Mr. X says, okay, you may give a thought and you may get back to us. Mr. Y goes back home, discusses with his family, decides that he will buy this car. In the meanwhile, Mr. X sells the car to Mr. Z. Now Mr. Y says, since I had decided that I wanted to buy this car, you cannot sell it to Mr. Z. But Mr. X says that the assent was only in your mind and it was never communicated, and therefore the offer was there but the acceptance was not there, therefore the promise did not come into picture and therefore the contract does not exist. So it was a mental unilateral assent on the part of Mr. Y that he wanted to buy X's car. He did not communicate, and therefore since he did not communicate, no acceptance, no promise, no agreement, no contract. Now, once I've given my offer acceptance, once I have known that, okay, how will it be complete, the communication, I also need to know that what is revocation of this offer and acceptance, and when revocation can be other than by communication as well. My section 4 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 talks about it. It says revocation is complete as against the person who makes it. That is, in case if I want to revoke it, how is it complete? When it is put into a course of transmission to the person to whom it is made, and the person who has made that revocation, he cannot revoke that revocation now. Say for example, Mr. X decides to sell his car to Mr. Y. Okay, he communicates to Mr. Y in writing. Mr. Y was thinking whether to buy the car or not. Now, when Mr. Y is thinking, Mr. X dispatches another letter which talks about his willingness to revoke his particular offer. So, Mr. X, who wanted to revoke the offer, has dispatched his revocation to Mr. Y. So, it is out of his power, and therefore, this revocation is complete for Mr. X. Now, as against the person to whom this is made, that is in the instant case Mr. Y, when Mr. Y receives this communication or receives this dispatched letter with respect to revocation, that is when it comes to his knowledge or when it comes to the knowledge of Mr. Y, then it is complete against the person Mr. Y. Now, when can a proposal be revoked? It can be revoked anytime before the communication of its acceptance. So, situation. Mr. X proposes to sell his car to Mr. Y. Mr. Y gives his acceptance. Now Mr. X wants to revoke it. It's not possible. Why? Because the acceptance has already flown back. Now there can be another situation in this. Mr. X says, I want to sell my car to Mr. Y. So it is 22nd 04 2007, 2205 2017. Mr. X wants to sell his car to Mr. Y. He sends him a letter by speed post. Now, this was say at 10:30 a.m. At around 11:30 a.m., he realizes he does not want to sell his car to Mr. Y. He sends another letter by speed post on the same day at 11:30. Now both these letters are in transit to Mr. Y. After this, Mr. Y receives both these letters, letter 1 as well as letter 2. One was that I want to sell my car. The second one was that I am revoking my offer that I made to you, which was already in the course of transmission. Which one would be applicable? Now at this point of time, whichever is opened first, whichever Mr. Y he has opened first would be acceptable to Mr. Y. Say if Mr. Y opens the Mr. Y first receives the offer and he hasn't given his acceptance by then, the offer can be revoked on seeing letter 2, provided he has not received it by then. And first if he opens letter 2, that is the revocation, the letter 1 loses its particular applicability. Now, there was something more that we talked about, that was when is communication of acceptance complete. Now this communication when we understand in the light of my revocation. So Mr. X says, I want to sell my car to Mr. Y. He sends a letter. Mr. Y luckily receives it on the same day. So Mr. Y takes out another communication to Mr. X saying, I want to buy a car. But by this time, Mr. X realizes that he doesn't want to sell his car. So he's made the offer. Now he sends another communication of revocation. this acceptance is not yet complete because it hasn't reached Mr. Y as of now. So, if this revocation reaches Mr. Y, before the acceptance reaches Mr. X, what will be the fate of this particular offer? So I have sent my acceptance hasn't reached the offerer or the proposer or the promiser, and the revocation also hasn't reached. So whichever reaches first. If the acceptance reaches me and the revocation hasn't reached him, accepted. The car has to be sold. If the revocation reaches him first and the acceptance reaches me afterwards, because obviously we can all track that where is the speed post coming from, who has received it at what point of time. So if this revocation reaches first, the offer is revoked. If this acceptance reaches first, the offer is accepted. Then a proposal may be revoked any time before the communication of its acceptance is complete as against the proposer and not afterwards. Situations when revocation can be by other than communication. So you had to fulfill some condition precedent to acceptance. Say before signing your joining letter, you had to reach office by 10 a.m. If you did not reach by 10 a.m. and not communicate anything regarding it, revocation is communicated. Non-acceptance is communicated. When the proposer dies or goes insane, so someone gave you an offer, he dies. Offer is revoked because it is not the duty of the legal hire to fulfill an offer, because offer does not have a legal standing. When the proposer goes insane, well, he's insane, he's of an unstable mind, he does not understand things in the same sense or in a proper sense, therefore he cannot fulfill any legal obligation, therefore the offer is automatically revoked by other than communication. When time for acceptance lapses, you had to reply within 10 days. You are replying on the 12th day. Since you had to reply within the given time frame of 10 days, the stipulated time period or the required or identified time period, and you did not reply by then, therefore the offer is automatically revoked on the 11th day. With this, we end up our first unit.